Now we request Praful Bidwai to talk on the Supreme Court judgment on Kudankulam.
Right. Friends and colleagues, I speak on behalf of the Coalition for Nuclear Disarmament and Peace, but as many of you know, I'm also a journalist and writer, a columnist, and I've been following the Kudankulam project for a number of years, from the early 90s. Now this judgment, which was delivered on the 6th of May, is a major perversion of justice, very similar to the Supreme Court's bad judgments, legally unsound and morally unsupportable judgments in the Narmada case. Its refusal to intervene to stop the disastrous Enron project, which has very nearly bankrupted the Maharashtra State Electricity Board, and so on and so forth. But this judgment, in many ways, is disappointing, all the more because the court has gone beyond what it was asked to do. The petitioners who represent the people living in villages near Kudankulam, which is in the deep south in Tirunelveli district of Tamil Nadu, and fairly close to the southern tip of India, it's just 1 hour away to the very southern tip of India. These people have been fighting against the project since 1988, when the agreement was originally signed between Mikhail Gorbachev and Rajiv Gandhi. As you know, since then the Soviet Union collapsed, the project got delayed, and now one reactor is almost ready. This petition was moved to express the apprehensions of the residents of this area about the safety aspects of the plant, and two kinds of questions were raised. One, location-specific hazards of these reactors, which are specific to Kudankulam, and secondly, generic problems or generic hazards that are associated with all nuclear power generating stations, no matter where they are located. As you know, the world's first core meltdown in a reactor happened at 3 Mile Island in the United States in 1979. The second one happened in Chernobyl in the former Soviet Union in 1986. And the third one happened in Japan, 3 core meltdowns together 2 years ago, little over 2 years ago, in March 2011 in Japan, Fukushima. So the petition basically said, we want to know if the Kudankulam project authorities have complied with the norms laid down by India's sole nuclear regulatory agency called the Atomic Energy Regulatory Board, AERB. They wanted to know if all the precautionary measures stipulated by a special committee appointed by the government after Fukushima, and it made 17 recommendations related to safety, had been complied with. The petition wanted to know if quality control checks had been carried out thoroughly on all aspects of the plant and the major components, in view of the fact that some of the suppliers, Russia-based suppliers, were implicated, not just practically but legally, in corruption cases involving the purchase and use of substandard material. In particular, one company called Zia Podolsk, which supplied critical reactor vessels, pipes and valves, had its managing director jailed. He is in jail right now, both for corruption and for violation of safety norms in reactors supplied into Russia, to China, to Iran as well. So the petitioner said have safety checks being carried out. Now instead of answering this question in a straightforward and detailed fashion, the Supreme Court went on to sing praises of nuclear power, how it is good for the country, how it is indispensable for progress. Right? It did not answer some of the critical questions that were being asked. So what were the critical questions? Let me just give you 2 or 3 examples. The Atomic Energy Regulatory Board, and I will call it AERB from now on, AERB has norms for siting of reactors, where can reactors be erected. And it says that the site must not have any population, zero population, strictly zero population within a 1.5 kilometer radius from the boundary wall of the plant. Secondly, the number of people living in a 5 kilometer radius should not exceed 20,000. Okay? A third stipulation is that before a nuclear reactor is loaded with fuel, before uranium in some form is loaded into the core of a reactor, an emergency preparatory plan must be drawn up for evacuation in case of an accident. An accident can happen even while the reactor is being loaded with fuel, therefore this must be done before fuel loading. Now what does this emergency evacuation plan involve? It involves the collector coming to that area, identifying roads through which vehicles will be taking out people far away from a possible source of radiation leak or other disaster, commandeering the vehicles, buses, trucks that are necessary, telling people that they have to leave at very short notice, all this within a 16 kilometer radius. Okay, now look at the facts. 1.5 kilometers, there should be absolutely no population. You can go and see for yourself with the naked eye, there are at least 20,000 people living there within a 1.5 kilometer radius. In fact, a tsunami rehabilitation colony was built only in 2007, which is less than 1 kilometer away. You can see that the distance between the tsunami colony, in which there are 450 tenements. The distance between the tsunami colony and the reactor domes is just 700 meters, 800 meters. The norm says within a 5 kilometer radius, 20,000 people is the maximum. There are more than 40,000 people living within a 5 kilometer radius. NPCI, the Nuclear Power Corporation of India Limited, which is implementing the project, admits to the Supreme Court that in a 5 kilometer radius there are at least 24,000 people living. Okay, according to the 2001 census. 10 years on, their number would be larger, but even if you take the 2001 figure, it's 24,000, which is in excess of 20,000, the maximum permissible. The Supreme Court passes over this. It doesn't even take note of this. It doesn't ask if the 16 kilometer emergency evacuation plan has been drawn up and a drill conducted. You know how many people live there? At least 1.5 lakh people live in a 16 kilometer radius. And the government doesn't have the courage to admit to them by involving them in the emergency evacuation process, admit to them that there could be a serious enough emergency when the living there would become extremely hazardous and they have to be moved out. And therefore it has not carried out this exercise at all. The Supreme Court passes over all this. It's shameful. It's shameful that these admitted violations in black and white of the norms stipulated by the sole regulatory agency pertaining to nuclear power are completely glossed over and condoned and in effect legitimized by the Supreme Court. Take the 17 recommendations that were made after Fukushima to improve safety in all nuclear reactors. And these are simple things. For instance, have a backup diesel generator. You have one generator. Suppose that something goes wrong in a nuclear power reactor, it stops generating power. It happens hundreds of times. Scores of times in a year this happens. There's a power outage. But you need power to run emergency cooling systems, to run controlled rods, which determine the rate of reaction and generation of energy in a reactor. So you need supplementary power, auxiliary power, that is usually provided by a diesel generator. But that diesel generator may fail, so have a backup. Simple thing, it doesn't cost a lot. You know how much does a diesel generator? Some lakhs. Such simple recommendations, 17, the Nuclear Power Corporation has failed to implement 11 of the 17. And it is not prepared to say when it will implement the rest. Now, this also the Supreme Court glosses over. The Supreme Court says we are satisfied that the problem of radioactive spent nuclear fuel, which is the most dangerous part of the entire process of power generation in a nuclear fission reactor, which is that it leaves huge amounts of highly radioactive nuclear waste which remains hazardous for tens of thousands of years. I'm not exaggerating. The half-life, that is to say, the period during which the mass of a particular substance will decay to half its original level through natural process of decay. That's called half-life. The half-life of plutonium-239, which is produced in large quantities in all nuclear reactors, is 24,400 years. Unless 10 half-life cycles elapse, the material does not become safe to handle. So you're talking about 2 lakh years, right? Must elapse before that. Do we know how to handle these things for so long? Humanity's entire history of building construction is 8,000 years old. Do we know how to build structures that will last 200,000 years? Does science, can it give us guidance on this? No. But the Supreme Court is told by the Nuclear Power Corporation, no, don't worry. We have, a process called of finding deep geological repositories. That is to say, caves and cavernous spaces inside mountains or deep in the earth, which will remain stable for long periods of time. But geologists will say that there is no guarantee they can remain stable for tens of thousands of years. No. A few hundred years, perhaps. Tens of thousands of years, lakhs of years, no. But they say the experts feel that the setting up of a DGR is not much of a technological challenge. I mean, these are jokers. They haven't understood the science, they haven't understood the geology. They're talking rubbish. Right? They accept everything that the Nuclear Power Corporation says uncritically without examining it. It is the duty of any legal forum or authority to sift the evidence that is presented, look at it scientifically, analyze it, determine how true it is, how correct it is, and make a discriminating judgment. That is what the apex court of the country is meant to do. It has failed. I'll give you another example. The reactors being built in Kudankulam are light water reactors. That means the water that circulates through the core under pressure is light water, unlike a particular substance called heavy water, which contains a heavy isotope of hydrogen called deuterium. Now, all our reactors in India, barring Tarapur, are of a different kind. They are called pressurized heavy water reactors, PHWRs. They use heavy water to cool the reactor and moderate the reactor. And then their design is different, their construction is different. Now, the NPCIL submits before the Supreme Court plans pertaining to the safety codes of a pressurized heavy water reactor, PHW, and the Supreme Court accepts this as a PWR plan, PWR code. This shows complete illiteracy and stupidity. Okay? But the worst part of this is a value judgment that the Supreme Court indulges in, which is that people's lives, which are threatened and liable to be threatened by radioactivity, by releases of toxic substances, of chemicals, both routine and catastrophic releases, are a minor matter, right? So they actually use the term that we have to strike a balance between the economic, scientific benefits. What is that? Economic, scientific, economic benefits is one thing, scientific benefits is another, but they've lumped the two together, of nuclear power and minor radiological detriments. Minor inconveniences from radiation. It's like saying, nuclear war can spoil your entire afternoon. I mean, it's the understatement of the year. Nuclear war will devastate the world. It will destroy the world. It's not one afternoon. It's a long, 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 long night for the whole world. It's not your afternoon sleep we're talking about. So these are not as Fukushima has shown, where, as you know, 250,000 people have had to be evacuated for long periods of time, for 40, 50, 70 years. They will not be able to return to this big radiation-affected zone. This is not a minor detriment. This is not a small violation of safety norms. This is not a trivial inconvenience. But the Supreme Court says that the balance between this minor detriment and the massive benefits and the economic scientific benefits of nuclear power, has been rightly struck, and therefore the larger public interest of the community should give way to individual apprehension of violation of human rights and right to right guarantee under Article 21. I mean, this is just ridiculous. That is inverted the term. What it means that the violation of human rights and the right to life should give way to the larger public interest, should yield to the benefit. But it just shows non-application of mind. When you have a formulation like this, and when you treat the right to life, which is a fundamental right, so casually and so cavalierly, you make statements that are unbecoming of a good judicial tribunal, which is what the Supreme Court is meant to be. So, and finally, they say about the apprehension, the real fears that people have after Fukushima, right? And those fears are not irrational. For God's sake, Japan is probably the world's most industrially advanced, technologically advanced country with high safety standards, high safety awareness, and yet 3 core meltdowns could happen in Fukushima, right? And it shocked everyone in the world. The nuclear industry is more or less dead in the developed world, let me tell you. In fact, the developed world has not ordered any nuclear reactors for decades. The last developed world meaning OECD countries, North America, Western Europe, and Japan. The last order for a new reactor in the United States was placed in 1973, 6 years before 3 Mile Island. The last time a reactor was commissioned in the European Union was before Chernobyl, which happened in 1986. You know the story of Japan. I mean, it's closed down. There are only 2 reactors out of the 54 that existed before Fukushima, which are running now. This is the nuclear industry's heartland. 2/3 of the world's 400 nuclear reactors are in the OECD countries, and their nuclear power has no present and no future. No bank is willing to finance it, no insurance company will cover a nuclear reactor. And yet, we are told that these fears are meaningless, apprehensions are meaningless. And why? they have no basis, but apprehensions of accidents. And accidents happen everywhere in all technologies, we know that. And in a nuclear reactor, those accidents can have catastrophic, large-scale consequences. But they say that this fear has no basis. Why? Because nobody on earth can predict what would happen in future. And to a large extent, we leave that to destiny. We leave that to God, to destiny. Therefore, apprehension is something we anticipate with anxiety or fear, or fearful anticipation, which may vary from person to person. In other words, there is no point going into the issue of nuclear hazards. Now, can you have a more absurd judgment? So it's actually an insult to our intelligence, it's completely irrational. It buys uncritically into all the arguments put forward by all the apologetic arguments put forward by the nuclear industry without examining them critically, and therefore is unworthy of the Supreme Court. It's a travesty of justice.